Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with a video that is about the best books I have ever read. But this is according to Goodreads. It's not according to me. I saw this video going around quite a bit. I think it was last year, and I think it's really interesting, where you just kind of go on your read shelf on Goodreads and you sort by average rating so you can see which books are the highest rated on Goodreads that you have read. And so my hope is to make this more interesting, that I feel kind of controversially about the ones that are the top rated, but I thought we could go over maybe the first top 10 or so, just see how we feel. Do I agree? I went on to Storygraph last year. I did this whole big massive thing where I migrated all of my data from Goodreads over to Storygraph. I did a video all about like my all-time stats that Storygraph gave me. And I tell you what, I have sincerely never logged back into that platform. And it's a shame because I really do think in terms of stats that Storygraph is offering you a whole lot more than Goodreads is. But Goodreads does have this really great option to look at the average rating of the books. And I think that's fun. I think that's really interesting because we all rate things so individually. And a 5-star to me could be a 3-star book to you. And so this is all very personal, and I expect all of the average ratings here to be high, even if we were to look at the lowest average rating. But I'm going to go on and skip over stuff like the Harry Potter series, for instance. I think all of those will be up here just because they've been read by so many people. In fact, I would say I bet the large majority of what we come across initially is going to be like the last book in a particular series, because by the time you get to that point, you kind of weeded out people who aren't interested in the series. So of course the average rating is going to go up. So I'll try to skip over those. I might try to go for either the first book in a series or standalones, but let's go on and get into this. I'm going to go on and apologize for this terrible lighting that we're going to get from my iPad on me. I really do think it makes me look haunting. But the first one is one I have to say, like, on the one hand, I'm really shocked by, but on the other, given the hype that this book has recently had, I'm not shocked to see it up here. But this is literally the top rated book that I have ever read on Goodreads, and it is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I also rated this book 5 stars, so I definitely played into the average rating here, but the average rating is 4.68, and I'm going to click on it. Let's just see how many ratings there are in general, because I think this is wild. It says there are almost 45,000 community reviews, but I think over 200,000 ratings on Goodreads' system. So this is a book that has been read by a lot of people, and apparently it has been highly rated by a lot of people. I would love for someone to dig into the phenomenon that Fourth Wing has had this year, because it is so interesting to me. On one level, coming onto BookTube has taught me like how unique my reading tastes are. Like sometimes I read something and I wonder, will anyone care about my review of this? Do I know anyone who's into this type of thing? But on the other hand, BookTube has taught me just how basic I am, because I also rate all of the top books of BookTube highly as well. And so I am not shocked that I loved Fourth Wing. This is a dragon fantasy. A lot of people are talking about this as a fantasy romance. To me, the romance is very much secondary to the plot of the book, but I think really the reason that this has been so successful is that it's nostalgic for a lot of people. I think this really hits on what a lot of us love about fantasy in general, and what a lot of us loved about fantasy when we were younger. This was really, really fun, lighthearted. It was action-packed. I read it at the beach. I just feel like that was the ideal place to have read it. And I loved the characters. I really, truly did. And so I have been fascinated by how things have switched for Fourth Wing. Like around the time that it came out, and really the reviews that we were getting early were all entirely positive. And it seems like for me, since then, since release date, I have seen the majority negative reviews. I just don't know what people are complaining about here. I mean, I really just think this book has it all. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I definitely agree with this. Then of course, we do have more in the series. We have A Court of Mist and Fury. I also rated that 5 stars. What can I say? Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Did I rate that 5 stars? Yes. Crooked Kingdom. I rated that 4 stars, but I can see why people would like it. We are apparently just in an area of series, so I just won't stay long on these. Warlord by Bernard Cornwell. That is the last one in the Saxon Story series that is about Uhtred, son of Uhtred, the love of my life. I feel like if you have made it through 13 books with a character, you were going to, by default, rate the last book 5 stars. So I'm actually shocked that the average rating for that is only 4.6. I would expect that to be a lot higher, actually. Now we are still in the series section, Cassandra Clare, Clockwork Princess, which is the last of the Infernal Devices. I also rated that 5 stars. It's so good. I'm sorry. I wonder just how controversially I would feel, because I feel like I tend to really like what the masses really like. I think what I really like and what gets me invested in something is sometimes the community aspect when we're all reading the same thing. I just think that's really fun to watch everyone read the same book at the same time. And I think that kind of elevates my opinion of the series. But The Infernal Devices truly is a work of art, and it's a classic. It should be published by Vintage. All 3 of those books are classics in my opinion. Okay, finally, we have a standalone, so we have something that I can talk about, which is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is a memoir that was written by a Nickelodeon star. She starred on iCarly back in the late 2000s. And this book is not necessarily about the Nickelodeon or Child Star experience exclusively, though it does go in depth into that in a really interesting way. But this is mostly about Jeanette's very fractured relationship with her abusive mother. And it's a very hard read. I would suggest that you look up trigger warnings before you read it. But really the reason why I picked the book up is because I was really curious about the child star aspect, and specifically to reflect on Nickelodeon, which was my most watched channel as a child. And iCarly, I think, was either at the tail end for me, or I was already out of watching stuff on Nickelodeon by that point, so I'm not even that familiar with her show. But she exposes a lot of what was going on at this network in the 2000s, and it really makes me curious about other stars that I used to watch growing up and wonder about what they went through. It's really sad to think about people like Jeanette, who were people we welcomed into our homes every week, sometimes every night when you're a kid. If you have a favorite show, it is on all the time. And to think about those people who gave you comfort, who made you laugh, going through something like this behind the scenes is really, really upsetting. This is a very heavy read, but it is fantastic. It's truly the best memoir I've ever read, one of the best nonfictions I've ever read. So I certainly agree with the high average rating here. The average rating is 4.5, which is pretty great. We have more series. I promise I'm trying to get through all the Throne of Glass books here. But now we have another nonfiction, which I'm kind of shocked by. But this is Secondhand Time by Svetlana Alexievich. And I am not shocked at all to see this here. This is truly phenomenal. I wonder about people who would rate this less than 4 or 5 stars, because this is incredible scholarship. Svetlana Alexievich is a historian that is often recording oral histories. And so she is talking to the last of the Soviets in this book. She speaks to people from, I think, 1989 up to 2010. This is a book that she conducted research on for over 20 years. And so a lot of what is written in this book, alongside many of her books really, are actual people's words, people that she interviewed, people that she did an oral history with. Their words and their interviews show up in her books. And so I find it very difficult to rate someone talking about their own life experience, especially someone who's maybe not an author. And so I do think this one has gotten a high rating just because it's an incredible compilation of a bunch of different information across a very long time span. But it's also talking about really difficult, heavy topics. And I just think this is brilliant because along the way, you start to wonder, like, how comfortable are these people speaking to her? How comfortable are they speaking about something that happened 20 years ago versus something that happened last week? And if you are a historian, or if you've studied history at any sort of higher level, you'll really enjoy the way that she constructed this because it's very nuanced. I personally agree with this. I also gave this 5 stars. So I don't want to say that I enjoyed it, but I do think it was very interesting. I think I learned a lot, and it's a book that I would highly recommend. I really think in general, she is a pretty dynamic author. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I'm gonna go on and admit it. I also rated this 5 stars. So far, I am really agreeing with the top books on Goodreads for me. I don't know that I would say that any of these are personal all-time favorites, but apparently I have also rated these very highly in the past. But The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo was a booktube darling when it came out back in 2017, 2018, it seems like. And it is one of the first books that I read when I was exposed to booktube. This is my Taylor Jenkins read. I know a lot of people talk about Daisy Jones and the Six. That's great for y'all if that was the one for you, but there is no other than Evelyn Hugo for me. This was beyond. This is a historical fiction about an old Hollywood film star telling the story of her life to a reporter. And it is so good. She had 7 husbands. And so you go through the book learning who her 7 husbands were, and you learn too who her real true love was. I loved this. In fact, I do think I would say of the ones we've covered so far, this is the one that is the closest to an all-time favorite for me, because I just found this absolutely stunning. I don't necessarily think that Taylor Jenkins Reid has the most beautiful prose style, but I really do truly just in general love her characters. And I think a lot of the reason that people have taken to her over the past few years is just the way that she has been able to develop characters. Speaking of books that are classics to me, classics in my heart, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is up there. I just think there's something so beautiful about it. There's just a lot of heart in this novel. It really works for me in a way that none of her books have before or since. What are we on? Are we on 4? I think we're on 4. I have to get past more series. Now we are just in general in the Saxon Stories series section, apparently. The Sun and Splendor by Sharon K. Penman. Say it with me. I also gave this book 5 stars. This is my favorite Wars of the Roses historical fiction. This is really one of the books that kind of rehabilitated Richard III's image. It is basically a meditation on Richard III. It is a historical fiction about his life from birth to death, or from childhood to death, and it is extremely well written. One thing I'll say for it, and I just do think this is going to bother a lot of people, if you know anything about this time period, if you know anything about Richard, he is whitewashed in the extreme. I mean, he is just a saint in this book. He is soft, he is gentle, he is very much just kind of in general the image of chivalry. Me personally, I eat that up every single time. I love it. I would like to see it more. But I think that is something that really is kind of a stopping point for those who know anything about this time period, who've read a lot of historical fiction about it. This is just a classic at this point in terms of Wars of the Roses historical fiction. Sharon K. Penman in general was just a fantastic historical fiction author. This is her best. It is a standalone. It's dreamy. I just love Richard III. What can I say? That's why I rated this 5 stars. I would say the high rating that this has to come from those of us who were in basically the Richard III fan club, people who just stan Richard III, because I just feel like that's who the book was designed for, frankly. This is another of my kind of all-time favorites. I would say this is one of my favorite historical fiction books of all time, definitely. I don't want to say that I want there to be more controversy, but I just feel like I'm agreeing with every single high rating. I just think that's kind of funny. We then have Wolf Hall. Now, I know Wolf Hall is part of a series, but Wolf Hall is one of my favorite books of all time, so I do want to talk about it. Speaking about classics of historical fiction and speaking about favorite historical fiction for me, Wolf Hall is it. Wolf Hall is everything to me. I really cannot think of a single critique I would have of Wolf Hall. It is that fantastic. And so Wolf Hall is the first in a trilogy about Thomas Cromwell by Hilary Mantel. It is insanely good. I'm not the first to say this. I won't be the last. A lot of people really love this. It really made the rounds, especially when the 3rd book came out back in 2020. I love all 3 books in the trilogy, but Wolf Hall is clearly the best. It really does stand head and shoulders above the other 2. This is one that's kind of controversial because I see a lot of people recommend this. Like, if you know nothing about the Tudor period, you can start here. In my opinion, you can't. In my opinion, you can't. This is for somebody who just loves the Tudors, I think, or someone who has a good background knowledge of them, because the writing is done in such a way that it's like you're listening around corners with Thomas Cromwell and you're hearing people gossip, but it's never said who is speaking sometimes. And so you're often required to pick up on clues in the dialogue to learn who's talking. And so I think that could be confusing if you don't have like all the workings of the Tudor court in mind when you go into this book. I'm of course not saying that you have to be an expert on the Tudors, but I think a lot of people who really love this are people who've just always been fascinated by Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn and that sort of thing. But this really is high quality historical fiction. This is my favorite that we have come across on the list so far. We have Verity by Colleen Hoover. And I feel like I read this on a whim. I am stunned at the conversation around Colleen Hoover that is still ongoing and that is constantly ongoing over on TikTok. It is beyond me, because I feel like that is a conversation we cycled through back when booktube was in its baby years. I mean, years and years ago, I remember people talking about her. Verity is her most popular, I would say, and to me, Verity is the only one of her novels that has ever held any sort of intrigue for me. It's the only one I was ever really interested in. I listened to it on audiobook, and I'm going to tell you what, it's not bad. I think I rated it 3 stars. It's not bad, but the way people talk about this book is that it's either the best thing they have ever read or the worst. And I think that's really interesting, because you would think from seeing it up here that it has an incredibly high average rating. Most people think that it's really good. And I'll agree, the book is fun. There's a lot of twists and turns in this. There's something very Rebecca, Jane Eyre about it. And I tend to really like books that are having conversations with the themes of Jane Eyre and Rebecca. I love those. And in fact, I think the adaptations of that theme are often so much stronger than Jane Eyre or Rebecca ever was for me. And so I do think that's interesting. I thought this book analyzed it in a fun way. But this is one I would say definitely doesn't deserve to be up here. It just feels very middling, and for me, it was good while I was reading it. I really wanted to know what was going to happen, but I truly have not reflected on it at any point in the past year. We have The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now, my Madeline Miller is Circe, which is so shocking to me to think about because I'm such a Trojan War girly. So by default, you would think Song of Achilles is going to be the one for me. But there was something about Circe. Circe had something that the Song of Achilles just didn't, in my opinion. But the Song of Achilles is a classic for a reason. A lot of people love this one. Her writing is so beautiful, and it really is sad. I love the Trojan War just because it offers us the opportunity to write books like this. There is something so human and so raw about just the events of the Trojan War in mythology. And the story of Patroclus and Achilles is only one part of it, but it's also a really incredibly sad part. This book is sadder than Circe. If you know anything about Patroclus and Achilles, then you know where this book is going. And it's very, very sad. And so I think part of me attached to Circe a little bit more just because it didn't have that tone of melancholy or that feeling of dread for you as the reader as you're going through it. But I can see why this one is rated so highly. I think I'm kind of the odd one out. I think I prefer Circe, but it seems like a lot of people prefer The Song of Achilles. I am thankful to this book, though, because I feel like it single-handedly has given us the huge crop of Greek myth retellings that we are currently going through. So I'm really glad she published this for selfish reasons. But I love the trend of literary Greek myth retellings. We need more of them. Pachinko. I think y'all know how I feel about this one. This, to me, is just baffling. I truly am baffled when people tell me that they loved Pachinko. And every time I say I don't like it, I get somebody in the comments raking me across the coals. You didn't understand it. Yeah, I did. I did understand it. I think my issue with Pachinko was the writing style more than anything else. It was clipped. It felt very stage direction-y. I just don't get this one. There's been a lot of award-winning historical fiction out there that I have said, wow, that truly did deserve all of the accolades it had gotten. This is the one that truly leaves me scratching my head because I think, did I read the same book that everyone else is talking about? On every single level, this book just wasn't for me because aside from all of the weird writing and the writing style that I just couldn't get over and that I couldn't comprehend, I just didn't enjoy. Aside from that, I really thought the actions of the plot and the character dynamics were so soap opera. Things would happen that were objectively terrible, but compared to the rest of the book, when you thought about the rest of the book contextualized, so many terrible things happened that at some point you became desensitized to it. I learned a lot from this. I'm thankful to this book because it sent me down the rabbit hole of learning about the Japanese occupation of Korea. And now I know more on that than I ever thought that I would. But this just was not very well written, in my opinion. And so this is one that continually leaves me scratching my head. Last but not least, I think this is my 10th one. Maybe I've miscounted. But last but not least, we have The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Does this one deserve to be here? Yes. I also rated this 5 stars, as I have with apparently every other book that we've come across. We've only had 2 that I felt quite controversially about, but The Count of Monte Cristo should be rated higher. This average rating is 4.29. Why isn't it 4.68? Why? I'll tell you why. This book is really long. It really is very, very long. I read this in school. We were assigned this, I think, in sophomore year, and we read definitely an abridged version of it. And I tell you what, that was great. But I came back to it when I got out of grad school and I wanted to read classics for fun. I just wanted to read them without the intervention of the classroom. The Count of Monte Cristo was one of the first ones that I picked up, and it is fantastic. And let me tell you, I really think you can do this unabridged. I think this is easier than what you might think. I think the pages fly by. You are just so engaged in this story, you don't want to put it down. Alexander Dumas is one of my favorite classic authors. I think he's fantastic. This is a story of revenge. It is also, weirdly enough, historical fiction that is set during the age of Napoleon, and it is so good. When I talk about getting revenge, when I talk about a revenge story, I really am talking about The Count of Monte Cristo. In The Count of Monte Cristo, everybody that you hate, everybody that betrayed him, everybody that you want to see him get, he gets them double fold. There's only one dude that kind of gets off easy, in my opinion, but the rest of them, he plays the long game with, and it is so much fun to read. It's genuinely a pleasure. Where is my 8-episode long miniseries of this on PBS Masterpiece? Where? Even better, where's my 8-part miniseries on HBO? That's what I deserve. The film doesn't count. Let's not talk about the film. Yes, Henry Cavill was in the film and he tried to carry it. But we need a miniseries. That's what we need. I'll never stop harping on this book. If you're not into classics and you think you never will be, this one will prove you wrong. Actually, all of Alexander Dumas will prove you wrong. He's really fun. He's all about having a good time. And that's me. That's why I'm reading. I'm reading to have a good time. And so I definitely really connected with The Count of Monte Cristo because it proved to me that classics are not all stuffy literary fiction where you're just reading about somebody's slice of life. That bores me. It bores me in contemporary fiction, and it bores me in classic fiction. But this is a ride that is so much fun. It's so wild. It could have been written yesterday. It's truly incredible. I definitely agree with this one. So those are the best books that I have ever read, according to Goodreads. We skipped over so many books that were in series. It's incredible to me. But I think the next video that I will do will be the opposite of this, and we can learn what the worst books are that I've ever read, according to Goodreads. That I'm really scared of. But that's going to be all from me today. I would love to know down below if you have read these, and go on your Goodreads and sort by rating. Find out what the best one that you've read is. I would love to know that in the comments below. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.